Alrighty, guys, welcome back. Yesterday, I only had a couple of minutes to do some puzzles. Today, I've got about 20 minutes. So I'm going to hopefully keep on progressing through this first puzzle streak. Again, the goal is to reach up to 50 correctly answered puzzles in a row. And this is all part of my training to one day become an international master of chess. So I'm going to share the screen here. We're going to get straight into it and make the most of this 20 minutes or so. Okay, finding the best move for white. First thing I see is, of course, the potential here to deliver a check and a fork, winning the rook. And I can only imagine that's going to be fantastic. Take the rook. Easy does it. What can we do here? This is interesting. We give a check. If the king moves away, we can give another check. And then we're going to be double attacking this rook at the very least, which is nice. So at the very least, I think that's a great move. The only thing is, what if he decides to take the rook? Well, if he takes the rook, we can take his queen. And that's going to be very nice as well. So is there really any other option other than this? I don't think so. So, okay, we take the queen. Very good. Here I'm straight away seeing this alignment of the king that can be taken advantage of by giving a check. And when the king moves out of the way, whether it's here, here, or here, I can then take the queen, and then he will have to recapture more than likely. And then we're going to end up in a position where the king is here. So my queen can capture the pawn here with another check. And if the king goes up to either of these squares, I would take the rook. So he's not going to allow me to do that, but he also can't stay here. And he can't come here. So he would have to move the king then here or here. And then my queen, probably if he moved to here, I could give the check here. So probably he will move here. And in that position, am I happy? I can't take that, but I could push this pawn up. I think it's looking good anyway. If nothing else, why not win this queen? I really don't see a reason why not to win that queen. These puzzles, they tend to start off pretty easy toward the beginning of the streak, and they get progressively harder. That's not to say I'm always going to get them right, but here we go for white. What's the best move for white? Well, clearly, it looks like we have to move this knight out of the way, but we may not have to, because we could play check, forcing him here. And then there is also check that he can take en passant. So again, check, he has to move here. No two ways about it. Then there is this nice fork. And that's going to be pretty good. In fact, I think that's checkmate. Check, mate. Yeah, that's checkmate. So mate in two. Okay, and we're just progressing on. So I know I'm not really explaining much here. It's more just me having a training session. I can see there's a check, which is also a discovered attack on the queen. It's very hard to pass that up. We've got to be precise in our calculations. If we give the check, he could use the queen to block. But then I can take, if he takes back, I take back again, and it's going to end up being my queen versus his rook. So that's really nice. Any other ways for him to defend? Maybe he could use his own rook, but even in that case, I've got check. And, you know, if he moves out of the way, I can, well, that might be slightly annoying, but even then I can give a check. And when he takes the rook, I can take the queen. So it's going to be that check. Okay, we're just going to pick up. Well, are we? Or are we going to give a check here? Check there. Seems like he's going to get away, and we've lost the chance to win a queen. So I'm going to take the queen instead. Here we have, I think, pretty easy. Take the queen. He's going to recapture. Then we give a check and fork the rook. So that looks very nice. I was having a quick look. You know, we could castle, or otherwise bring the rook across with a check, but this is just better. No stress way of doing it. Here we've got the alignment of the rook and the queen with a bishop in between. So we straight away look for this check to move the bishop away. And after he recaptures the bishop, we're going to be able to recapture that queen, which looks very good. Is there anything better? I don't think so. You know, we consider giving a check here first, but that would give his queen an opportunity to come over and defend and get out of the attack. So let's take that queen. Okay, so far so good. We're up to 11 correct in a row. Now, what's going on here is his king looks quite open because the pawn that presumably originally was here has moved over to this area. So the G file on which his king sits is fairly weak. We can bring our queen here to try and take advantage of that situation. Would be taking away all of these squares and his king would be forced to either here or here. So let's have a look at that to start with. Let's say if he goes over here, do we have a follow-up? Do we have a follow-up there? Well, we could take the knight, couldn't we? Yeah, which would be with check. And if he then moved back across, well, we've already won a knight, which is nice. We could then even take this, which hits the queen. If he takes back, we could, yeah, that just looks good. And also interesting is if he comes here, we still get to take the knight. So this just looks like it wins a knight. Is there something better? Because our rook does hang, but once we take the knight, which we will do, then our queen will defend the rook. So that's nice. Is there anything else to consider here? This hits his queen, but it can be taken in a variety of ways. And the queen could also just take the rook immediately. So I think I'm going to win the knight, defending the rook that way. Okay, looking for the best move for black. Looking at this, keeping the rook on the 7th rank, or the 2nd rank in this perspective. That would be a check. In fact, that would be a checkmate. So clicked the wrong button. Get to see the whole game that led to this point. Here we go. I believe that's checkmate. Now white to move, taking the queen, taking the bishop seems like a potential move, because regardless of how he recaptures, if in fact he recaptures, we can then get our queen for ourselves. Of course, we could get the queen straight away, check, and he's going to want to take that queen off the board. We recapture with check, and then his only move is to come here. There's no further follow-up though. So I think we take the bishop, and unless he wants to just, let us get a queen and let us get away with winning a bishop, he's going to have to recapture. So I think we're going to take this. He's going to take with the queen. We're going to give a check. He will recapture. Then we're going to have a rook, and that's going to be an easy victory. So we get the queen, and it's a rook to the good for us. Okay, black to move. What I can see is this going on, which means this is actually pinned. This piece cannot defend here. So I'm just looking at a check, and when he moves, we give a checkmate. Again, that was pinned, so he couldn't recapture. What if we take there? I mean, that's one option, but I'm also now seeing this would be an option, giving a check. And after the king moves, here or here, which are the only two options, well, then we can rip that rook off the board. If he recaptures, we take the knight, and then we've got a number of extra pawns as we move into the endgame, which is nice. We could also do it this way, check, but then he gets to capture with the rook. So I think it's going to be this, check. Where would he go? Is this better or is this better? I suppose if he comes here, we can follow him with another check. Probably doesn't make a lot of difference, but this will be the first move regardless. Let's take the rook and let's take the knight. So that's good. We've got 2 pawns here versus 1. It's a little majority. So I'm straight away thinking, we can use these to somewhat distract the king, which I have to go over and do that. When the king gets distracted and ends up over there somewhere, we can take this pawn and then perhaps come over here and get these pawns and win the game. So I'm thinking it has something to do with moving this pawn up. So, if we do this, what can he do? I mean, his king can't really make any progress in terms of entering the 5th rank. Were he then to move this pawn, we can simply push past it, and that would be an unstoppable pawn at that point. So he can't even contemplate. if I play a4, he cannot even contemplate b3 because a3 would result, and then a2 and a1 promoting to a queen shortly thereafter. He can't move this. If he just moves the king somewhere, then I take this pawn, and the situation looks really good. So that really just leaves, options to move these. So if I play a4 and he moves this pawn, then I guess I can play a3. I could play a3, and if he takes, I take, and then he's going to have to start getting closer to there. So when I promote, he gets my queen. Then I take this pawn. He starts bringing the king back. I shoulder that king off, and that would be a way to win. And the same would be said after a4. If he played anything like this, wouldn't be a problem. a3 would still follow. So I'm pretty confident that's going to be the answer. Now he's going over this way. I think we still do this. If he takes this pawn, he's going to be too late. Okay, and again, we're going to try and move him away. So that worked out well. Okay, so here we go. This is very close to becoming a queen. It's not quite there. He's already just got a queen. I've got a knight in the corner, so we could give a check. That check would be checkmate if it weren't for the fact that he can salvage the situation with his rook. So if I give a check, he has to take. Then I can give another check there, and he'll have to bring the rook back, and then there's going to be a mate on f8. So that is fairly straightforward. There is also the possibility of bringing the rook here. If he were to take the rook, we could give check, and that would be checkmate. The issue is if we come here, it's not a forcing move. So that gives him a move. He doesn't have to take this. Instead, he could give a check. And only after I move my king, then he could take with the queen. So that's why the move order is important. We're going to take check first, which forces into recapture. Then we play the check, gather the rook, and that's a checkmate. So we are playing for black here. What's the best move for black? So clearly, white's fairly vulnerable on the g file, but white also has some connected passed pawns on the a and b files. So we may want to be pretty careful about this, but they are a while away from their queening squares or their promotion squares, which gives us perhaps a little bit of time to orchestrate an attack here on his king. One option would be to put the bishop here. With the bishop there, we would be threatening moves like bishop takes. And after that, well, this is kind of a tricky one for me, actually. So it's a bit annoying how light chess, sometimes these puzzles go through previous move orders, but I can't really complain about light chess. It's a free website with fantastic resources such as this puzzle street phenomenon. Anyway, bishop f3. If he were to continue trying to get his queen, that would be something we should consider. He can't really give the check because we can always still take that with the bishop. Bishop is looking at the d1 square. So if he just progresses on further down the road towards queening, then I guess we also have check as a possibility. And that's really nice, because then if he moves away this way, then we've got this check, which is a discovered check, forcing him back here. When he's back there, then we can give this check again, but now the two rooks will combine. So I actually think that's definitely going to be the answer. Now, since the threat is to give check, is there any defense? And I guess defense, you might be wondering, can he take the bishop? No, we can't because it's pinned. But a possible defense here would be to push this pawn forward. Push that pawn forward, thereby blocking out the rook. And what do we do in that scenario? My initial temptation would be to push h5 and then look for h4. But he's under no compulsion to take. And even when we do recapture, he can take with his h-pawn. So I'm not really seeing how very helpful this is. One good thing is it puts our bishop on a long diagonal, which is very nice. It will control this queening square very nicely too. But in terms of getting an attack on his king, how do we actually proceed after this? No, that's possibly a very important question to ask in this scenario. And I wonder whether there might even be a role for a rook sacrifice, bringing the king out, and then, bringing the bishop back, looking to get a check here. I can't really see that being correct because, we'd be giving away a lot of firepower, giving this rook away and leaving ourselves with only a rook and a bishop against, still quite a formidable army. And this is capable of giving some defensive measures. And as I say that, I realize that this bishop is undefended. It's undefended, but if I were to capture it, then my bishop would also be undefended and he could capture it, which may thereby demonstrate the utility of this move, because we are threatening an extremely strong move there with a rook g2 check. If he comes here, we give checkmate. And if he comes here, we give check. And then it looks like checkmate's going to follow shortly thereafter. So I do think after this, he's going to have to play g3, at which point we can take his bishop. And we're going to go into a very winning endgame there. This pawn will be under attack. We're going to have the queening squares covered, and I can't see anything better. So good. Still got about another 5 minutes left in this puzzle streak run. Now, how to actually finish it off? I'm seeing here's a nice check, forcing him into capture, and then that's actually checkmate. So I think that's what we're going to do. All right, now we are black. Best move for black here. There is a check. This check gives him a couple of options. Some of them are moving the king. He really can't block it, so he really has to move the king in that scenario. After he moves the king, I guess another option then is to move this pawn, opening up the bishop. But our bishop is actually under attack here too. So this is another very careful situation. Very annoying. Okay, there's also this check. This check can be blocked fairly straightforwardly, but then there would be this check as well, which is, not necessarily a bad thing. But this is tough. This is, at least it's not immediately obvious. So I think this check is the one that stands out to me at present, because it also brings my queen close to his rook. And actually, I'll be able to take that rook then. And with that rook off the board, I will definitely have a winning position. So that's what I'm going to do. Very good. Okay, we'll see if we can get to 25, but I'm not going to rush. White to move, straight away seeing that there is this check, which is almost a mate. The only square that he would have would be this. And after that, we can take the knight with check. He could then move down here, but we would take the rook with check. And after he moves, here, let's say we can take this rook. He can recapture, but we have a winning position. So I really do like the look of this check. And what am I talking about? Did I say that he can move here? No, I didn't. I said that he could move here. But after he moves there, we've also got this check, which, if I'm not mistaken, is checkmate. So checkmate. Okay. A couple of minutes left. White to move. White to move. We'd like to take this rook, but the knight gets in the way. So a move like this comes to mind, trying to distract the knight. If that knight moves, we take the rook. Is there any further threats that we are creating with this? I guess we're threatening to take his knight, which is nice. We're not afraid of him checking us. We simply take. There's no other checks he can deliver with the knight. So he really has to deal with that issue. If he just takes a pawn, well, all right, we take the knight. I think we're happy enough with that. This pawn is still under attack. I'm actually very happy with that move. And that's exactly what happened. Okay, black to move here. We've got a check. And that forces in here, at which point we can play this move, attacking the queen, and also threatening mate. So that queen would have to defend the mating square somehow. And the only way it could really do that is by coming here, here, or here. And in each case, we can capture that queen. So I really like that. Or he could defend the mate square with a rook. I didn't notice that actually. Of course, he's given up the queen in so doing. And I think we're happy to go ahead with that. Take the queen. I don't think there's anything better at this stage. So we'll just take the queen. And one more. That's all we've got time for today. We'll get up to 25 in the streak, which is nice. And we'll continue it either possibly later today or more likely tomorrow. But how do we solve this one? Obviously, our queen is under attack. And his king is looking fairly vulnerable. We can't just, or can we? Can we just take the bishop and give up our queen? Maybe because we can give a check, then he comes here. There's no way to follow up after that, unfortunately, that I can tell. We could try and take this pawn. Why would we not do that? Well, he would have a check. That's annoying. Take the pawn. He has check, which is a discovered check, which makes us have to move our king. Once our king moves, he can actually push that pawn further and end up with a passed pawn, which will become very frustrating and annoying. Nevertheless, our queen's under attack. And if we simply move the queen away to a safe square, maybe this one, this square, then he can give us a check anyway. He can give us a check with this pawn. And, the king has to move. If he takes our queen, we take back with the knight. Okay, but I'm just sort of wanting to find something better here, How about check? If we give a check, now we're talking. Because now what I'm seeing is this queen and this pawn are basically wanting to give checkmate here on g2. Now the problem is the rook's in the way. We don't have time just to take the bishop because of course he takes the queen. But if we move the rook away with a check, then he has to respond to the check. He actually can't move the king anywhere. He has to take the rook either with the bishop or with the pawn. And regardless of how he actually does that, he then leaves himself open for a checkmate there. It's hard to get better than checkmate, so I'm going to do that move. We're up to 25, and guys, I'm going to have to leave it there because I have to get on with some other things. But hopefully we'll see you again later, and we'll continue this puzzle streak on the road to an international master title and on the road to hopefully 50 puzzles correctly answered in a row. All right, guys, so we'll see you next time. Cheers.